Welcome back to another episode of the Caffeinated Christian Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Ryan Willard. I don't know why I'm yelling right now, but I'm excited to be here, and I'm here with Pastor Mike Rigglesworth.
We're going to talk about some really good things today. Ryan, as you know, you have a new format. Ryan, what do you have for us today?
Yep, so shields up, everyone. So I've been teaching a class on fatalism at the church, and it's been actually pretty intense. A lot of good questions, a lot of conversations, a lot of meeting people for coffee and discussing certain things, which was really fun to have just great conversations with people in the church about topics that are important to me, and you come to realize that these are important to a lot of people also. So it's kind of a cool realization. But I've been studying a little bit during this topic more on the open theist view. And so I want to talk a little bit about an objection I brought forth in the class to the open theist view. Now, some of you listening might hold to this view, great, but interesting to hear then your take on an objection that I put forth to the class to see what they thought on this. So quickly, open theism states this. There's two major camps. That God doesn't know the future. In a sense, the future is open for God. And there's a lot of reasons why theologians believe this. One, the problem of evil resolved, the fatalist resolve, and a lot of certain resolves that if God can know things and is all powerful, that God should be stopping these things. And so God doesn't know these things. Now, I think that it's not a sound argument in my opinion. But besides that, the two camps of the open theism, the first is this, that there are truth values to future propositions. They exist. I can say something about the future, and there's a truth value attached to it, and it's real, and but either God doesn't know because his nature can't know it, or God chooses not to know, right? And we can go down the wormhole what that means. The second camp is there is no actual truth value attached to these future propositions because there, in a sense, is nothing there in virtue of to make that thing true, right? And so one of the objections I brought forth to a proponent of this is if you think there are no truth values attached to future propositions, it seems to me, and there's a lot of literature on this, that you have to deny two really important principles. And the first one is called the principle of bivalence, and the second one is called the law of the excluded middle. The principle of bivalence states this: when it comes to every sort of proposition, it is one of two values. It's either true and it's either false. There is no third value, which some people try to argue for, and it winds you in some weird consequences, right? They say there's a half value, and I'm not even getting into what that means. And the law of the excluded middle says, sure, you have the true or false, and it must be one or the other. It can't be both, right? Because if it's true and false, you have this crazy contradiction happening. But it seems to me, if you don't think there are truth values attached to future propositions, you're going to wind yourself up stating that things that have to be necessarily true cannot have truth value to them, which I think winds you up in a very weird situation. Let me give you an example. The statement, this has nothing to do with what we believe politically, just giving you a statement, and you can fill in whatever candidate you want. President Trump or future President Trump or Donald Trump will or will not win the 2024 election. Let me say that again. Donald Trump will or will not win the 2024 election. And what I've done is I've given you a compound sentence of two balloons, two future tense propositions, right? Mike, I can't hear you.
Yeah, so I just wanted to give some context for our listeners. I had my mic muted for a second. So we are on Zoom right now, and Ryan did a peace sign, and balloons came up. So there's all sorts of weird things happening on Zoom. So let's hear on what was happening.
So if that's the case, that statement, it seems to me, is necessarily true. It's either he will win or he will not win. Whether he dies, whether he wins, whether he drops out, whether he gets beaten, that statement is necessarily true. I don't know what other option it can be than it is true. It can't be false. It makes no sense. It can't be, there's a middle ground. It's either true or false. Now, you might say we might not know if it's true or false, but that's a different thing versus that it is true or false, right? Ontology versus how we epistemology is a different thing, but they work together. But if you are an open theist in this that don't think there is values to future propositions, you have to say that the thing that is necessarily true cannot hold the truth value, although it is always necessarily true. There is a value attached to there. And so we can start doing a lot of these with sentences and propositions to show why the principle of bivalence and the law of exclusion is crucial to our everyday thought and giving us information content. But certain camps of open theism reject these laws, and I think it causes a disastrous effect on how we look at reality. So I think it's a very strong argument why open theism should be not considered as a way out of problem of evil and fatalism. And we should look for other ways on top of other reasons why. So that's just a cool little shields up idea of why I'm not an open theist, and a good sort of conversation piece when you have conversations with someone who might hold to that position.
Yeah, and I get the temptation to adopt open theism as a theological paradigm because it resolves the issue of why God doesn't do anything about the suffering of this world.
Yeah, right.
It's appealing, but like you said, it does get us into some pretty dicey waters logically when we follow that
And I think biblically too. Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely biblically.
So,
Okay. So normally we would get into the archives and hand this over to Bradley, but another new segment that we are doing in our new format is called the archives, where we go into the annals of church history and just explore what some of the great thinkers of the church have said throughout time. So I have a lot of books on my bookshelf in my office, not nearly as much as Ryan does, but enough to where people know that I like to read. And one of the things that I do is I have prayer books that I walk through for my own spiritual growth and development. And one of them is the Book of Common Prayer. It is something that more high church denominations will employ for not only their ecclesiology and how they structure their church worship service, but also for personal devotion for prayer.
Yeah.
And I've found this to be a helpful and effective thing to incorporate into my prayer life. And I don't know about you, but I can get kind of distracted when I have a lot of things on my to-do list, and having prayers that are drawn from the scriptures and from prayers throughout church history can be a really helpful thing to help set my attention and my mind back to Jesus. Yeah. And I don't have to expend mental energy to try to come up with the words to do that. So if you find yourself distracted by life's anxieties and worries, let me recommend to you a book of written prayers. It's not a wrong thing if they're prayed sincerely. But one of those books is the Book of Common Prayer. This is a newer version that was written and compiled by Shane Claiborne. And what's interesting is for each day, there's prayer for each day of the calendar year, is each day has a little tidbit from church history. And from September 25th, which is the day that we're recording this episode, here's what it says. God spoke to 14th century mystic Catherine of Siena, saying, I did not intend my creatures to make themselves servants and slaves to the world's pleasures. They owe their first love to me. Everything else they should love and possess, as I told you, not as if they owned it, but as something lent them, right? So that, to me, comes back to the important concept that has, I think, been not taught properly in the church, or just not taught at all in the church, and that's the concept of stewardship, right? Church, rightly so, has taught on the importance of tithe when we're talking about generosity. But an unintended consequence of talking about the tithe is that, okay, we talk about the 10th of our income that is supposed to go to kingdom work, but then the subtle implication of talking about that says that, well, The other 90%, I could just be a complete moron with. I could just do whatever I want with it. It's mine. But that's just not true if we're to take our cues from the scriptures.
Right.
What's true biblically is that everything belongs to God. 100% of my money, my possessions, my time, it all belongs to him. And so that little reminder from church history, I think, is important, that all that we have, everything that we enjoy in life belongs to God. And so we should be open-handed and generous with it. We should hold it with an open hand and not a closed fist. So I just felt that was a helpful reminder for us today, especially in our culture.
Great.
And everybody's favorite segment of our show, we come to the good and the bad and the churchy. And so for this segment of the good and the bad and the churchy, we are pulling up an article that comes from the Roys Report. If you don't know what the Roys Report is, it was started by Julie Roys, who used to work for Moody Radio. She's a journalist by trade, and she began the Roys Report because she started to see some things in the church that did not align with the teachings of Jesus. And the Roys Report is a news outlet. They write articles on a dedicated website called julieroys.com, as well as a podcast. And what they write here, a lot of what they do gets misrepresented. And I feel like we need to say this, that she's written some articles on James MacDonald, on John MacArthur, on they wrote an article on the former church that our family pastor, Joe Giebel, was a campus pastor at, which their articles actually aided in getting that church shut down. So it gets misconstrued as just this rumor mill that just spreads out, baseless lies about these churches that are trying to do kingdom work. But her job is not to try to do that, but she wants to restore the integrity of the church. Ephesians 5 that says, have nothing to do with the deeds of darkness, but instead expose them. That's what they're really aiming to do. And I give that as a pretext to what we're going to share today, because I don't want you to think that we are just trying to spread rumors about a church and discredit them, drag their name under the mud, through the mud, or anything like that. But here's the headline of the article, and then you and I will talk about this a little bit, Ryan.
Yeah.
The headline is Matt Chandler's church, and his church is called the Village Church, hired his father, an admitted child sex abuser, former elders say. And this was published on July 12th of 2024, so relatively recent. This is a story that can just easily get buried in the cacophony of articles that get thrown out into the internet. So I felt it was worth us talking about this, not to drag Matt Chandler's name or the Village Church's name through the mud, but just to have a broader philosophical question about how churches should handle situations of people who come to their church that have self-disclosed that they are, they have abused someone in the past. And so here is the article. We'll just go through it and we'll talk about it. Ryan, feel free to simply respond and interject when you feel like, giving some commentary on it.
Yep.
Here's how it reads. Matt Chandler's Dallas area megachurch employed his father for 5 years as a custodian, despite his father admitting that he had committed a child sex crime. And this is coming from a former elder of the Village Church in Denton. Matt Chandler's father, Steve Chandler, worked at the Denton, Texas campus of the Village Church from 2007 to 2012. It's quite some time ago. In 2015, the Denton campus became an autonomous church, the Village Church Denton. In a statement read during a members meeting in July 14th of 2019, the Village Church Denton stated that Steve Chandler had committed a child sex crime 40 years prior. The statement said that staff at both the Denton campus and all locations of the Village Church became aware of Steve Chandler's criminal past in 2009, yet he remained on staff for another 3 years. Until this week, news about Steve Chandler's criminal past and church employment was not widely known. But on July 10th, the Bodies Behind the Bus podcast, it's a broadcast, they broadcast this news during an episode featuring the former chairman of the elder board of the Village Church Denton and his wife. The couple were identified simply as Chris and Anna. However, the Roy's report found the couple's last name and confirmed their identities. They've agreed not to report the couple's full names to comply with their stated wishes. So they stated that Steve Chandler's sex crime at 2019. Sorry, let me rephrase that. On the podcast, Chris said he first became aware of Steve Chandler's sex crime at the 2019 annual meeting. According to Chris, the Southern Baptist Convention, which we know some history behind them,
Yeah.
their handling of sexual abuse was a major focus at the annual meeting because of widespread sexual abuses and cover-ups within the denomination. Unfortunately, we've had to, we've seen a lot of articles on that recently.
Yeah.
And the day before the SBC meeting, the New York Times reported that a former associate children's minister at the Village Church had been arrested and charged with molesting a girl who attended the church at summer camp. Chris said a pastor from the Village Church told him in a private conversation about Steve Chandler's criminal past and employment. Chris said he was initially confused about how this could have happened, and he quickly went into detective mode to learn as much as he could. This eventually led to the leaders of the Denton Church to disclose the information at a members' meeting attended by 50 to 100 people. Chris said church leaders previously indicated that member meetings were for family business information that ought not to be shared outside the family. According to Chris, the main campus of the Village Church in Flower Mound had planned to inform its congregation about Steve Chandler's past the same day. However, shortly before the planned meeting, the Village Church leaders decided not to tell the congregation. Okay.
Now, Mike, can I stop there for a second?
Absolutely.
So we can get the dates right and make sure I get the dates right on this. It sounds like he worked for Matt Chandler at Matt Chandler's campus for a handful of years, from 2007 to 2012.
Correct.
As far as I can tell, he doesn't work there at this point.
He does not work there today.
Okay, yeah.
Correct.
So this gentleman found out in 2019, around the time of the SBC, that this actually occurred, and he was working there through this period.
Yeah,
right?
years after he had left.
Years after he was there. Okay, so I just want to get the timeline right. It's not like this is coming out and he's still working there at this point. It's
Correct.
just the fact that he did end up working for at least 5 years at the church.
Correct. And we could talk about the way that this information was disclosed was not wise.
Yeah.
Not the best. I think we could all agree that the church should have handled this information differently and should have been transparent about this. So yeah, we could get into that a little bit later, but
yeah.
So there's another detail behind this, and the headline of this second part of the article says that Steve Chandler reportedly confessed this at Celebrate Recovery. All right. So, according to a statement, Chandler shared his child sex crime with others in a recovery ministry at the Village Church Highland campus, Celebrate Recovery.
And we don't have a date on when he did this. It doesn't.
So we'll get into that as we continue on. The statement did not indicate when the confession happened, but stated it occurred before Steve was hired on staff.
Okay.
So this was disclosed in a confidential space, Celebrate Recovery. Similar, it's Christian version of Alcoholics Anonymous, basically.
Sure.
With a little bit more gospel infused into it. So this occurred before he was hired on staff. Steve's testimony included him vulnerably sharing many of his past sins, including his past sin of child sexual abuse 40 years ago. So he was, again, a victim of abuse, which just about all abusers tend to be. A sin and crime Steve had first voluntarily confessed to the district attorney and court of law 40 years ago. So this was also something disclosed by, to law officials as well. Although it claims Steve Chandler's admission was public knowledge, the statement reveals those who were directly involved and responsible for hiring him, including his immediate supervisor, were not aware of it. Okay? So it sounds like there was a breakdown of communication when Steve was initially hired. He did not disclose this information. Proper questions, it seems, were not asked during the hiring process. Sure. And whoever was facilitating the Celebrate Recovery program did not share that with the individual that was hiring Steve for this position.
Which we don't know if they legally I don't know how the law works. Do you legally have to do that or?
And we're talking laws in Texas.
Yeah,
Like
right,
it's
exactly.
just like, like that's a very different thing. And you don't know how much Matt Chandler knew at this time either. You
Sure,
know,
right,
I don't know.
exactly.
I don't know how much he knew.
Yeah,
Um, so it says, um, the decision was made not to terminate Steve from the church's staff. The statement reads, at the time this decision was made based on the theological underpinnings of God's redemptive grace and sanctification. These theological convictions led the executive staff of the village church not to terminate Steve from our staff, but to place the safety protocol around him for the remainder of his time on staff. Okay. Okay, so there's more that we can talk about in this article. I don't want to read any more of it. But here's the question that I wanted to present to you, Ryan, and
yeah,
for our listeners to consider a bit more today. The question of how a church handles someone with the past history of sexual abuse or any type of abuse,
yeah,
whether as a victim and as the victimizer, is is a subject of great concern, and it's a topic of conversation in churches. In fact, 2 years ago, we implemented specific safety protocols in our congregation to ensure that our children and our youth have the safest possible experience, and the parents of our church are put at ease when they drop their kids off for our children's ministry.
yeah.
So like all of our volunteers have to go through a sexual abuse prevention training to be what we have come to refer to as watchtowers. So if they see signs of abuse, they know what to do. They know what next steps to take, and so I think that's just really important. So when they speak of proper safety protocols, I totally agree with that. We should put safety protocols in place so that everybody can experience the redemptive grace of Jesus. But the question is, where do we draw that line?
Sure.
What do we do with people who have self-disclosed abuse situations? And does the redemptive grace of God necessitate that somebody gets hired on staff? Does it necessitate that somebody comes onto a pastoral staff? So like these are questions that oftentimes churches don't consider and thoughtfully go through until they're in the middle of crisis. And you don't think clearly when you're in the middle of a crisis.
Sure.
Ask any politician during COVID, right? Like it's just you don't. So, what do you think? What are your initial
Yeah,
thoughts?
so I wish there was more information, obviously. And I don't know how much the information the church actually had, because it's it's one thing to know that you've done something, right? I've known people who, so I'm just, I've
Mhm.
known people who've gotten in trouble and they didn't mean to do the act. And what I mean by that is like at work, like they said something, oh, I didn't mean to say it that way. Like, and then they got
Mhm.
filed against them. Like, I'm like, seriously, I'm sorry, I did not mean to say that. But it seems to me he came and reported himself. So it kind of,
Yeah, he disclosed it openly in a
yeah, it makes me
safe
allude that
environment.
there is some sort of uh there's some sort of disposition within him that is attracted in some sense to young kids, whether boy or girl, I don't really know, in some sort of way, right? It seems like there's like this inherent disposition versus accident, since he's the one that didn't fight for it, admitted to it, and just blatantly said, yeah, I
Mhm.
did this thing. So,
Yeah,
um, there's a few comments I have on this. The first is this, I am kind of tired, I should say. I hear these stories all the time of churches who don't understand how a church works. And what I mean by that, it seems to me that the decision process should also be offered up to the church members.
sure.
I The fact that everyone does, we're a local church community, right? And the fact that the head pastors and the deacons, everything gets locked in with them. Like, granted, if you have to do your finances and you want to work through this, sure, let's work through this and then show the church what we're doing, right? But it seems to me so often churches, I make the final decisions. I don't tell anyone. There's a hierarchy of 10 people that have all the say, and we don't offer up to the church members who it just doesn't seem what the church is according to scripture. So the fact that
Yeah.
even down, like it's one thing if I want to hire my son and he hasn't done anything wrong, no legal things, everyone fine, yeah. But the fact that you're going to hire the head pastor's father, who has this on his list, without even considering the opinions of church members who have young kids going there, is I don't understand how you don't see how that is minimally not appropriate. Like,
Right.
I
Right.
want my members to feel safe. I want to offer this up to them, and at
Yeah.
least say, "Hey, this is what's going on. This is
Mhm.
why I want to do it. Let's take a vote on this to see if you guys feel comfortable." It is
Yeah.
your kids that you are
Hmm.
bringing here, and they just
Hmm.
locked it up airtight, and they made the decision. I don't think that's
Yeah.
appropriate.
So
Um,
it's not the fact that they hired his dad, it's how they went about it.
No,
That's your
that's
main
one,
issue.
right? That's one point. That's
Okay.
a major thing. They didn't
Hmm.
disclose it to anyone, especially when it's the other people's kids that could be in danger, right? I'm not
Sure.
saying they are, but could be. Um, and another thing is, I just think I don't know what the safety protocols are. They just said safety protocols, but
Yeah.
it at
Yeah.
least alludes to me that they are minimally have some sort of nervousness that is
Hmm.
required to put, in a sense, additional protocols in. It wasn't, I'm putting protocols in that he has to follow with
Yep.
everyone else. It
Yep.
like you said, your people who work, you all have to follow this. It would be,
Yeah.
imagine if you had a gentleman there that had to go with what everyone did and then additional protocols.
Hmm.
That is a red flag to me right away. Whether
Hmm.
whether or not like he went through it and it was a long time ago. If you still have the sense that there needs to be additional protocols, should immediately throw up a red flag that we need to reconsider this more hardly, more
Yeah.
strict. Uh,
Sure. Yeah, and it does say in the article it specific safety standards and protocols were put in place for Steve Chandler in 2009 when he was hired.
yeah,
And it's according to the Bodies Behind the Bus podcast that he never received them. This is the author of the
sure,
host of the Bodies Behind the Bus podcast.
sure.
He asked for these safety protocols, and despite repeated requests, um, he never got them. Never
So
got them. So
so
so this
he asked
is
for the protocols.
so this is let me make sure I got this information right. Um, Chris, who is the I just want to double check that I'm getting this information right.
Yeah, just
Chris, who I believe was the elder
okay.
here. Um, Chris is at the Village Church Denton. He was the elder who was part of the leadership team back there. Said he never received the safety protocols even during his time as chair of the elder board. He was chair of the elder board and did not receive the safety protocols that were supposedly implemented for Steve Chandler's employment at the Village Church Denton. Now,
Okay, so there's no evidence really that he went through any of the
and
protocols.
now,
We
and
don't
now, if you're the chair of the elder board, you shoot out an email to some like an executive pastor, whoever is in charge of that sort of thing, and say, "Hey, can I get the safety protocols that were put in place when Steve Chandler was hired?" It should not be a
100%.
hard thing to produce.
There should be files of that,
There
records
should
of
be
that.
files. There should
Yeah,
be
100%.
records. There should be something. So that's a huge red flag.
Yeah.
Also, I know I said I was not going to read more of the article, but I think this is important for context.
Okay.
Um, According to a statement, Steve Chandler's criminal history did not show up on a background check. So standard
Because
practice is
because
to
he
do
admitted it,
background
I'm
checks.
assuming, right?
Yeah, and I think there's a statute of limitations as well that
Okay,
that may
makes
be at
sense.
place too.
Yeah,
I don't know how Texas law works. I'm not familiar with that.
sure. And so
Um,
can
yeah.
I mention one more thing?
Hmm.
I don't know if this is true or not, but I have two things I want to mention. One is I have a feeling in my gut that if it wasn't his dad, things would have looked differently. I can't tell you if that's true or not. It
Yeah.
just seems to have an interesting smell around the situation. I'm not claiming it is or not. I'm just saying it's very interesting. And
Hmm.
lastly, I know there there's one thing between like, yes, he has been forgiven and there is a restoration happening. We all believe that's what Christ does for us.
Sure.
That's a
Sure.
part of the gospel that we can be changed, right?
Hmm.
But so I think this comes down to a wisdom decision. If there needs to be certain additional protocols, right, needed, I I know plenty of people, and Mike knows I know this, who are going through something like AA and going through sexual things. They are always told that you should never put yourself in unnecessary situations.
Right.
And the fact that these protocols seem to have to have been put in place shows me that maybe this was an unwise decision because this is not a necessary situation he needs to put himself in. That there could have been other jobs maybe in this world for him that still wouldn't have found this background check. But the fact that he could have been dealing with the youth groups, the children ministry, and what he does in the services, if he still has these underlying dispositions, right, that he's still
Hmm.
struggling fighting with,
Hmm.
it just seems unwise
Right.
to allow
Right.
this situation to occur, especially on something such as this that the parents have no idea about.
Hmm.
I just see it as an extremely unwise situation. Why not hire him as maybe an overnight janitor?
Hmm. Well,
Why
it
not hire
says,
him as something else where he never needs to be put into a situation ever where there could be kids
yeah,
around?
and there's not a lot of context here because, like,
Exactly.
okay, we have our church is a church of 100 to 120 people,
Yeah.
and we have a part-time custodian. It happens to be my dad. Okay,
Yeah,
like,
true.
yeah, and he does a great job, but 9 times out of 10, I think actually 10 times out of 10, he's not here doing his job when there are kids around. And it
Sure.
wouldn't, obviously, it wouldn't be an issue if he was, because there's no past there. But um, I don't know if it's it's a major issue if he's a custodian and he's cleaning the building when there's no ministry
Yeah.
happening. Because
Yeah.
usually the custodians are cleaning up the facilities once everybody's gone. It's not like McDonald's where you got the guy mopping the floor when it's like lunch rush hour.
When you're
Everybody's trying to,
sitting
yeah,
underneath
while
your,
you're
yeah.
sitting.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's not like, I hope it's not like that. But um, but the question is,
Yeah.
what are the appropriate lines for a church to draw
Sure.
in in these situations? Because I believe that, again, the grace of Jesus is for everyone. Yeah, it is the church is meant to be this organism of people, founded on the grace, mercy, love, joy, peace, forgiveness found in Jesus Christ. And we're
Yep.
to we're to extend that same love to one another. And I believe Jesus died for the victim, and I believe Jesus died for the victimizer.
Absolutely.
And there has been a with certain people, there has been a scarlet letter placed on those who have committed, sex crimes, right? And I I fully concede the fact that, like, we need to put proper precautions in place. Like, there are people that okay, you can't work with our children ever.
Yeah.
You can't work with our youth ever. If you're a pastor in ministry and you commit a sex crime against a one of the teens or one of the children, you can find grace and redemption. You can be sincerely repentant, but you have disqualified yourself from ministry.
Yeah.
You have. That's not to say that God can't still use you, but there are just certain things you cannot do. I believe that. I hold to that. But I don't think it's inappropriate at all for the church to have brought on somebody who had this past as a custodian, I think that's perfectly fine. The fact that it's the lead pastor's dad creates problems, right? It smells like nepotism,
Sure.
right? And so I think additional protocols should have been put in place during the hiring process so it does not feel like nepotism,
Yes.
right? I think that should have been put in place. So this is not apples to apples. This is, apples to oranges. These are two different things, but they're similar. Um, I am the lead pastor of a local church in the Buffalo area. My father-in-law serves as a pastor and elder of the same church. And him and my mother-in-law came to this church prior to my family and I coming here.
Yeah.
In order to ensure that I was not hired because I am connected to Jeff, I'm married to his youngest daughter. The search committee was comprised of people that don't know me at all. Like none of them knew me.
Yeah.
So that's something that has to be, I think, set from the very beginning that he's getting the job because he's genuinely the most qualified. But the fact that he's Matt Chandler's dad and that he has this past creates issues. So I would encourage churches, if you're a church leadership, if you're a pastor, have these conversations with your board. Have these conversations with your staff. What protocols are you going to put in place to make sure that anybody genuinely looking for the grace and mercy of Jesus has the opportunity to find it? But to your point, Ryan, you're not putting them in a position where they're going to get tempted.
No, why
Right?
why would I do that?
Right. Yeah, we don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that's it's just a tough thing. And this is an article I share not to drag Matt Chandler's name or the name of the village church under the bus. Contrary, Matt Chandler had his own issues that I think his elder board handled stupendously.
Yeah.
When he took, I think it was like a 6-week reprieve from preaching because they noticed some unhealthy patterns in how he was communicating with a woman of his church. Actually, a person in his church confronted him on it, and he was contrite, and he openly confessed to the church, and like he wept. And I think his response to his church was extremely sincere. And I think that the elder board saw like, hey, this is an issue. Let's handle this issue before it becomes a major problem. Unfortunately, I don't think they did that during the hiring of his dad. And this was years ago, right? And so let's give Village Church the benefit of the doubt. But it just does raise important questions about church polity, procedure. How do we go about putting the proper systems and procedures in place to make sure that we're as transparent as possible with our congregation, and that we're not even sending the message that we're trying to keep things a secret, especially when it comes to hiring the lead pastor's dad as a janitor who has a history of a sexual abuse. So
Yeah, absolutely. And we all believe that the Spirit can work within you and change you from the inside out, right?
mm-hmm.
Clear in Scripture, it's a part of the good news. But what doesn't follow is that you automatically are open to then get any position you want.
Right.
Like it just doesn't say that in Scripture. It does. I mean, that is sort of a wisdom that each individual
mm-hmm.
church has to recognize. There is no implicit or explicit thing that you're going to find in there, but you need to look at, in a sense, discernment and go,
mm-hmm.
man, like, yeah, sure, he can be changed and renewed, but why would I take an unnecessary risk and worry
Mm-hmm.
And put my congregation in that situation without them ever knowing
Mm-hmm.
of certain things? It just seems not the wisest decision making.
Mm-hmm.
And like we said, Mike, you really could find him a position where it's like he will never come across situations like that
Right.
ever.
Right.
And it doesn't seem like this is the case because according to the Chris guy, it wasn't disclosed, it seems fully, right?
Hmm.
Or that it seems he was looking for the protocols
Hmm.
that was given. Yeah, I just
Yeah.
don't think.
Yeah, and there's other variables that they talk about in the article too. Like, I mean, obviously they said that okay, the person responsible for hiring him did not know initially, but they were made aware of his crimes,
Yeah,
still chose to keep him on staff. So,
yeah,
I mean, you can't be held accountable to what you don't know, right?
sure,
Like, I
exactly.
think that's perfectly fair. Like, we're not holding people accountable for the fact that they did not have any awareness of this initially when they hired him.
Right.
That's not the case at all. But once you once you find out about this, you're like, okay, like you're the dad of our lead pastor, and this is your history. Uh, Boy, this does not look good. This does not look good for him. This does not look good for Matt Chandler. This does not look good for the church. If
Yeah,
this information comes out, if we keep him on staff, and hey, like 15 years after his hiring, here we are talking about it,
yeah,
right? Like that's the issue here. And there's another set of variables here that I think are interesting. Like we said, his history didn't show up on a background check. Um, he was voluntary in his compliance with, um, you know, everything the court said that he needed to do. There's a period of intense counseling for 5 years. And the other thing is there was no national sex offender registry at the time of his crime.
right.
So that's not a thing. And that's just, yeah. Now here's another little bit. Now keep in mind, this is coming from a former elder of the Village Church Denton, not the main campus, but an autonomous campus that was established years back. He said, when we actually shared this with the congregation, it was clear that the primary purpose was to make sure the congregation knew that Steve was restored and had overcome these struggles. The fact that was the main thing that was communicated in the statement goes to show there wasn't a ton of concern for potential victims.
Yeah,
You know, there's the problem right there. It's not that they were inconsiderate of Matt Chandler's dad, of Steve. Not that they were being considerate of him and his restoration process, but in the process, they should not have been inconsiderate of potential victims. So
yeah.
that's
And it
that's the main
seems
issue.
if that's the case, I also want to get an additional thought in here. It
Hmm.
seems they have, I'm going to say this nicely. It seems they lack an understanding of the power of sin.
Yeah.
It's tough to let's put it this way. I haven't done a lot of things in my life, yet I still put safeguards in because I
Hmm.
know I'm a fallen human.
Right.
Um, and it's another thing if you go through things and you have an inkling towards certain things to go, I'm completely done and I'll never be tempted by that again, I think is to misunderstand
Hmm.
that you still have a sinful nature.
Sure.
And so to make a statement, he's not tempted by this anymore, I think is very short, narrow-sighted of the fact that
Hmm.
he might not feel it now, but it doesn't follow that he
Yeah.
can't feel it later.
Of
If
course.
we still have the ability to fall, we should always, even if we've never done an action, figure out safeguards for ourselves in all
Yeah.
these situations. And this
Yeah.
seems to just that statement, whether it's what they said or not, but according to the Chris who was on this is what it sounds like they said.
Hmm.
I think they misunderstand the power of sin.
Yeah.
Um, and I just don't think that once again is a wise sort of position to put yourself in.
Yeah. Um, a few additional thoughts that came out as you were speaking there, Ryan. I want to reiterate again that this is not to drag Matt Chandler or his church
No, not
or
at
his
all.
dad under the bus or anything. It's just to have an honest conversation about this. And um, But what comes to mind is it's actually a quote from a book that I read in seminary years ago called Addiction and Grace by Gerald May. It's a great book. It's kind of academic, but it's readable. And in the main premise of the book is that to be human is to be addicted, and to be addicted is to stand in need of grace. And so whether we're talking about a sexual attraction towards children, or you're talking about addiction to alcohol, or addiction to pornography, or even just enjoying a cup of coffee in the morning. And I'm not trying to lump all these things together, but it's to make the broader point that every single human being has some type of addiction. Everybody does. And we stand in need of the grace of God because of that. And like you said, Ryan, so in order to be met with God's grace, to be filled with his grace, we need to have some structure, some parameters around our life. Like we're walking through the Practicing the Way course by John Mark Comer, where we're talking about building out a rule of life, some guardrails and some structures. Like when Jesus talks about the trellis or the vine and the branches in John 15, it's you need a trellis, you need a support structure for the vine to grow up and out and bear fruit. And it's the same with the follower of Jesus. And for people who have serious besetting sin, certain addictions that harm people, right? Because like my addiction to caffeine does not harm people in the same way someone's addiction to sexual attraction to children would.
Sure.
So there has to be those safeguards in place. Like for me, my part of my story is, I struggle with addiction to pornography for many, many years. And I now, as a 38-year-old man, I know my triggers. Yeah. I know the safeguards I need to put in place. And I need to, as one recovery program I went through calls it, to create a victorious environment. Yeah. And so that's part of the responsibility of the individual and for the church to help facilitate this, creating a victorious environment for somebody who struggles with this. And I hope they had enough foresight to think through, like, okay, because of his history, because they found out about this the same year that he was hired, we can't let him anywhere near children. Right. But the fact, and this is where my mind goes, the fact that those safety protocols were withheld, and they have not been transparent and forthright about this information, leads me to believe that there's something they don't want the public to know. Yeah. Right. And that's scary. Because we should not be people of darkness. We should be people of light. We shouldn't be afraid of bringing things out into the light and what bringing it out into the light is going to do. Yeah. So anyway, churches, pastors, church leaders, guys, if you're not talking about how you can implement proper procedures, safety protocols for the sake of your children, please be talking about that. Please be having those conversations, because you don't want stories like this coming out later on and tarnishing the name of your church and tarnishing the name of Jesus. Right. So, all right. I think that'll do it for us today. How about that, Ryan? Any additional thoughts before we close?
No, just continue to be wise in your decision making, and I think always realize that the devil is a lot smarter and more clever than you, and is still trying to, in a sense, take you down. And since I'm not renewed and made perfect, I still have a possibility to fall. So put in as many safeguards as possible, and you put even more on stuff that you know you're more susceptible to.
Absolutely.
And I think that's what wisdom and discernment ought to do, in my opinion.
Yes. We are all prone to deception, right? Yep. All right. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Caffeinated Christian Podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and give us a 5-star rating. You can also reach out to us on Facebook or Instagram at the Caffeinated Christian Podcast. It's at the Caffeinated Christian Podcast. And as always, we would love to hear your thoughts and insights and ideas, suggestions about future episode topics. Until then, have a great day.